Big scrimmage in Allen Park today. We get the latest from Colton Pouncy of The Athletic.
You are Locked On Lions, your daily Detroit Lions podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's good, everybody? Matt Derry back with you on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day on a Wednesday, August 14th and a Thursday, August 15th. Thanks for making us your first listen, checking us out wherever you get your podcast. Thanks to our everydayers who are out there that watch or listen every day. Please, if you haven't, subscribe to our Locked On Lions YouTube channel, Locked On Lions Today, brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs have wounded down and the sports really aren't sporting like we want them to. Right now, great thing that FanDuel is going to give you for all customers is a boost or a bonus for the summer. Daily, that's right. Something for everyone every day all summer long. Go to FanDuel.com to get started. Follow us on Twitter at Derry Speaks, at Locked On Lions, and of course the Matt Derry Facebook fan page. A lot to get into today. Colton Pouncy is with us from The Athletic. We got good news on Jahmyr Gibbs. Not a major injury. Hendon Hooker's back. Colton, great to see you, and thanks for doing this.
Absolutely, Matt. Thanks for having me.
How you been, man? What you ready for the season to start? Have you had enough?
So ready, man. I think the practices are fun. I like being out there, and it's nice seeing everyone and the fans in attendance there. But once you do it for 3 weeks, it's like, all right, let's wrap this up. Let's get the season going. Let's get some games that matter, But so I'm kind of in that mode, but it's still fun being out there,
Today is technically the last day of training camp. What's standing out about the first few weeks here, and what's number one on your mind, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think the roster's pretty set with, where they're at right now. I think we kind of knew that going into training camp. They have a lot of veterans that are returning, a lot of young guys that are taking their second and third years in the league. So the roster is pretty much solidified. It's just really the back end spots, some questions there. Is Jake Bates going to be the kicker? Is he good enough to be the guy here? Have they set a wide receiver 3? I'm still not so sure about that. That player might not be on the roster right now. And then some depth spots like edge rusher and things like that. So I think they're kind of sorting that out right now. But that's why you have training camp, so these guys can have answers to their questions. The coaching staff, the GM, the front office. You got to figure that stuff out right now in August.
Tell me this, and I've said this, and I even emailed Justin Rogers the other day. Isn't it really wide receiver 4? Because we like Khalif Raymond and Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown are obviously locks. Isn't it really wide receiver 4? Are they thinking they're kind of calling it 3 because what Josh Reynolds was last year, kind of a bigger outside guy? Is that kind of the thinking?
Yeah, that's actually kind of what I wrote today. I just filed a story that'll go up later today. But one of the questions I had was, who's the wide receiver 3? And the way I answered it was it's Khalif Raymond. If you look at in terms of the best receiver out there, the best third receiver, it's Khalif Raymond. He's the one that's getting open against the secondary. Jared Goff has that trust with him. You see it, and you've seen it for years now. But in terms of that impact player, I think it's going to be Khalif. But at the same time, they do prefer a wide receiver with some more length, probably a little bigger. So it's really a formality, I guess. They're going to have to add someone else besides, Jamo, Saint, and, Khalif there. But I think he's going to be probably your third leading receiver in terms of wide receivers. Laporta will still be probably second, because he's tight end. But that position, I think, will go to Khalif.
How did the scrimmage go today? Hendon Hooker back. That's big because he needs reps, and it sounds like he's going to play Saturday. Yes.
Yeah, I think he's trending that way. They were supposed to have a full pad scrimmage, but they actually kind of went away from that with all the injuries, I'm guessing. So it was a little bit of a lighter day, I would say, but they still got some good teamwork in. Hendon is on track to play. It sounds like, he spoke to some of us after practice and said he's feeling good. He also said his mom wants him to slide more. So I think we'll see that,
Yeah.
So that's great news though for the Lions, the fact that he's even training to play. Cause when the week began, we really didn't know. Campbell was kind of non-committal about it. But it seems like he's improved and was back in practice. And if he can be out there Saturday, that's great news because he really needs those reps and we need to see what he can do.
Sounded like today the highlight was Jared Goff to Amon-Ra St. Brown was just absolute money. Yes.
Yeah. I think you kind of take for granted how good those guys are just because, you see them and they're out practicing. It's very, very nonchalant. But their chemistry is just, unmatched. There might be, 3 receiver quarterback duos that are better than them, that you can point to throughout the league. I put them up there with anyone. Goff will look his way early and often, especially with Laporta out right now. It seems like he's like one of his guys that he's throwing to, pretty much every other throw, every other play. So they had a connection. I believe it was a touchdown back corner end zone, like towards the end of practice. They're doing like a little bit of a situational drill there. And let me tell you, like Saint, one of the things he does really well, he hides his hands when he's tracking down a ball in the air until the very last second. So the wide receiver, or the DB, I should say, know when the ball's coming, where it's coming. At the very last second, you'll see him flash up the arms. It'll fall right into his hands. And that's what he did today on that touchdown. He's really good at that. And that chemistry with Goff is pretty unmatched, as I said.
I don't think Lion fans take Amon-Ra for granted, but we're talking so much about, Antoine Green gets hurt and DPJ and forthright. Maybe they don't need a wide receiver 4 because the number 1 just is going to do everything. And look, that still counts, right? He's just that good, man. It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah, the target's going to go somewhere. I mean, if he gets 160 targets and he's catching 120 of them, like I don't think you're going to be too upset about it. He's going to get his numbers. He's going to be productive. The offense is going to move the chains with him on the field, and I think that's pretty much it. Like I would argue even like Jahmyr Gibbs can be wide receiver 3 or 4 if you really want him to be, because he'll get 400 plus yards, and that's kind of what you're expecting from a wide receiver 3 in that offense. So yeah, they got their options for sure, but St. Brown's at the top.
Colton Pouncy with us from theathletic.com. He's done a great job covering the Lions the last couple of years. Please subscribe to The Athletic so you can read all the Colton stuff. You mentioned Gibbs before. How's the hamstring? I know Dan Campbell wasn't scheduled to talk to reporters, but was on the radio this morning on 97.1. What's the latest?
Yeah, I think he said on 97.1 that he thinks, Gibbs, Ennis Rakestraw, and Terrion Arnold kind of grouped them all together, but says he thinks they'll be fine with those injuries. So it was kind of when all those guys went out, we were watching Terrion, and I believe he went up for a one-on-one drill with St. Brown, kind of came down awkwardly, was looking at his arm a little bit. Ennis was limping after a one-on-one with Jamo. Gibbs was the one that kind of like escaped us. Nobody really saw him leave the field. So like we got the update after practice from the Lions, but none of us really saw him exit. So we were all kind of waiting to see what the deal was with him. Ends up being a hamstring. He's kind of dealt with that a little bit in his career early on. So you definitely got to monitor that. That's one of those things that can kind of reoccur and hurt you later in the season. But it seems like they're being cautious with him. There's no reason to push him in practice. What he can do. He's seen it. You've seen it on the field. So I think at this point, it's just about, monitoring his work and getting him ready for week 1. I think that's the most important thing right now.
Speaking of Gibbs, obviously he's not going to play, and you're probably not going to see he or Montgomery in the preseason. But what do you think of that running back room? I know Jamar Jefferson flashed a little bit. I love what I saw from Vaki in the first preseason game, albeit it's the preseason. But how do you look at that? And could Craig Reynolds' roster spot be in jeopardy?
I think Craig is pretty solidified. I know he's not the flashiest player in that room, but he does everything that you need your RB3 to do. And I think he knows the protections. The offensive linemen love him. He can pass protect. He can catch out of the backfield. So he's a very solid guy and a really good player for that room with a lot of young guys like Jahmyr Gibbs. So I think his spot's pretty safe. But a guy like you mentioned, Jamar Jefferson has been playing very well right now. And, it's tough to keep 5 running backs because Sione Vaki is going to be on the roster. You drafted him. You're not going to chance it and put him on the practice squad. But man, Jamar is playing some really good football right now and doing everything the coaches want him to do. So if you can try to make it work, I don't know, the numbers might be tight. I don't know if you can justify 5 running backs, but definitely on the practice squad, if no other team picks him up, I think that's kind of the goal for them right now. I've
been definitely not harsh on Jameson Williams, but he's a first-round pick. Let's go. It's year 3. Diving catch today on a 2-point conversion. Of course, my Twitter audience let me know that happened, but he looked good today, yes?
He looked great, and I think he needed a day like this after a couple up and down days, to put it nicely. I mean, more down than up, I would say. The drops kind of came back early this week. They had practice Sunday and Monday, and those were probably 2 of his worst days of camp, if we're being honest, because he has been pretty consistent, and the drops have gone down, but kind of ramped back up those days. So I do think he needed a bounce back day like this, and I think he got it. He caught a touchdown early in practice. That 2-point conversion might have been one of the best catches I've seen him make as a Lion. It was full extension, diving for it. The coverage was really good. I think Kirby Joseph was there. But great ball placement from Jared Goff and an even better catch. So, I mean, every time he tends to dip down a little bit, it's good to see him rise back up. I think that's exactly what you want. everyone's going to have their opinion of JMO, but at this point, I think he's just ready for the season. We just got to see him go out there and do it,
You heard that from Colton Pouncy, not just me. He had some drops the last couple of days. The fans want him, and you get this too, I'm sure, on social media and on your email, Colton. Fans want him to be good, but and he's been a fan favorite, and I see all the stuff he's doing in the stands and with the fans. They want him to be so good, but reality is this is a huge year for him, is it not?
It is a huge year. I mean, at the end of the day, he was a first-round pick. You drafted him 12th overall to have an impact on your offense, and that impact has been very minimal through 2 years. And I know a lot of that was out of his control. The injury coming in, I know that was going to be an issue. The gambling thing was definitely on him. But, third year, you expect him to have that breakout season, and it seems like the stars are aligning for it. He's just got to go out and do it. He's getting those first-team reps that he didn't have a year ago. Around this time, he was getting passes from Teddy Bridgewater. He was kind of repping here and there with the first team, but wasn't really able to build chemistry with Jared Goff. I think you saw that play out in the season. And so now he has a full offseason getting those reps, no interruptions, no injuries. He's out there pretty much every day. So it's like, it's now or never, man. Like, we got to see it.
More with Colton coming up next. There was somebody on the defensive side that made a pretty big play today. We'll get into that as well here on a Wednesday, Locked On Lions. Mentioned before, Locked On Lions brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. We love sports. We love them so much, we don't want them to stop. But now that the Olympics are done, the sports aren't sportsing like we want them to this summer. But FanDuel will let you keep the sports going whenever you want. All you got to do is open up the app and dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. Tigers, Mariners tonight, you want to throw some money down on anything you can, and including player props. You can do that at FanDuel.com. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every day. That's right. There's something for everyone daily all summer long. So head to FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and Locked On Podcast Network. Our man Colton Pouncy with us from theathletic.com. Lions with a little scrimmage today. As Colton said, pads came off. Ton of injuries we're going to get into in a second in that secondary. How about Jack Campbell today, Colton? A little pick six. I know the concern was he's making so many strides at that Mike linebacker spot, but can he cover? And can he move in space, in coverage? And today he showed us a little bit about that. Take us through the play.
Yeah, it was really good timing for him to make a play like that, because even before practice, we spoke with Aaron Glenn. He kind of mentioned that Jack Campbell's ability to drop in coverage has been much improved since his rookie year, which was, as you mentioned, the big question with him. We know he can defend the run. He's great in the box, but it's sort of the coverage ability and things that he actually needed to work on in his second year. So, I think Goff is targeting Amon-Ra St. Brown on the cross over the middle. Those plays are usually bread and butter for the Lions offense. And this time Campbell had an issue with it. He said, I'm going to take this into my own hands, literally, and picked it off right over the middle. And I think he kind of caught St. Brown off guard. He's like, did he just pick that? It was kind of like one of those reactions,
Yeah.
And returned it. So that was great to see. That's a player that the Lions are counting on this year. It seems like he's going to wear the green dot and be that Mike backer for the team this year. It's kind of what they drafted him to be, last year. So to see him make plays like that, I wouldn't say it's been a quiet training camp for him. It's just middle linebacker is one of those positions that's a little tougher to evaluate when you're not always tackling. So for him to make a play like that right after his defensive coordinator kind of praised him for his ability to drop into coverage like that, I think that was perfect timing and a good day for him.
I loved your tweet today that said Kindle Vildor season.
Yeah.
That was a new one. I didn't expect that today, but so decent performance, huh?
Yeah, he's looked good for a couple of days now. When Terrion and Ennis went down in practice, he's one of the next guys up along with Khalil Dorsey. So there's a play in I want to say it was Monday night when they had the late practice. The two rookie corners left. It was Vildor out there, and he got a hand on the ball. I don't even know who it was intended for, but he tipped it perfectly to Brandon Joseph, who was able to come down with it for an interception. I just think he's been practicing really well. He's one of those guys that you just kind of forget about. You're like, oh yeah, he's back. I know people they're not the highest on him after the NFC Championship game, but he's been real steady. And for him to come off the bench really and come off the couch to start several games for Lions down the stretch, I thought that was a credit to him. And the fact they kept him around after, a tough game like that in San Francisco kind of shows how they feel about him. So I do think he can be a depth piece on this defense. I think it'll come down to him or Cleo Dorsey. But he's been making plays in training camp the last couple of days, and had a deflection off I want to say a fade route to Amon-Ra St. Brown in the end zone. Got a really nice hand on it, just broke it up. You do not see that very often, especially in the end zone when it's one-on-one with St. Brown. He usually wins those reps. So for him to get a hand on it and break it up, I thought that was pretty impressive. And he had a couple other standout plays, in Wednesday's practice. So good on Vildor for making some plays for himself.
Look, you never have enough corners. You mentioned before, Terrion Arnold didn't practice today. Rakestraw's been out. Carlton Davis hasn't been healthy.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I know they signed a couple of guys over the last couple of days, but there's probably be some names that are unfamiliar to Lion fans playing on Saturday because you have to dress some cornerbacks, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they'll still lean on, some of the main guys that have been around here, like Cleo Dorsey and Kendall Vildor, and even, Stephen Gilmore is a guy that's been making plays. So I imagine it'll be mostly those guys and some of the newer guys they signed as well. But the cornerback depth is kind of thin right now. That was a position that we kind of looked at as, wow, they added a lot to this room. It's looking pretty good. But when you look at it now, Carlton Davis is dealing with a hamstring injury. He's kind of been injured the last couple of years. He's missed some games. So I think that's a little concerning. Nothing major right now. It seems like it's just precaution, but you do have to wonder about that. The two rookies, as you mentioned, Terrion Arnold, he's got the I can't remember what injury he's dealing with. Oh, the torn pec, not torn pec, but the pec injury. Yeah. Thank God it's not torn, because that's what CJ Gardner-Johnson went through last year. And even Emmanuel Mosley is dealing with this year. He's going to be sidelined for a few months, but it's at least enough to bother him to where he's going to miss some time here, but probably still ready for week 1. And it's Rakeshaw with the ankle. So yeah, I mean, that cornerback position is taking some hits here. So you're going to have to rely on some of the back end depth, probably more than you thought at this point in training camp, but that's the NFL, and you got to fight through some of those injuries.
Colton Pouncy with us from The Athletic. What do you think of what Brad Holmes has been doing? I've noticed his trend over the last couple of weeks, really last week. Antoine Green gets hurt, they waive him injured. Dayron Gilbert gets hurt, same thing. And now today, Maurice Norris. These are guys that have fought and were fringy roster guys, but what do you think of how the Lions have handled that? Is it just they're not messing around with it, they put them on IR, or what is the thought process, you think?
Yeah, at least with Antoine, the way Campbell spoke to us, it seems like it was a tough decision for them and something they didn't want to do. I know he was listed as a concussion, but Dan told us after the preseason game that it's also kind of a neck thing too. So I wonder if it's maybe a little bit bigger than we know right at the moment, because he was a guy that they did like, was getting some first team reps, in the spring and when training camp started. So, that's a tough blow, but I think, they had, as Dan said, they had to make the best decision for them in the moment. And that's kind of what they leaned on. Now, Norris was a player that was impressing me, did not have his best performance in the preseason game. If you watch the Eric Gray touchdown run, he kind of got a little crossed over there.
Not kind of.
Kind of. Trying to be nice here, Matt. Trying to be nice.
That was like Iverson. That was like Iverson on Jordan.
Yeah, right. But then he gets injured. That's unfortunate timing, and they kind of move on. So I think the difference this year is like, obviously the NFL, the teams this year can wait until the very end to make their roster cuts. Whereas last year you're kind of cutting it down slowly. So maybe some of these guys don't make it if they were in the old system, and now it's still like the full team together until cut day. So I do wonder if that's part of it, and maybe that's a way to kind of pick guys off while you're still here and get some extra bodies in the meantime. But it is important to see two young guys like that, because I thought both of those guys were playing well and trying to make some money for themselves.
And I know you do some roster projections and stuff at The Athletic. Do you have Brandon Joseph as a lock to make this team?
I didn't when I published mine this week, and then he kept making plays and more interceptions. And, I think the tough part for me was whether I wanted 4 safeties or 5. And if it came down to 4, it was either CJ Moore or Brandon Joseph for that last spot. I know how much I love CJ Moore on special teams, especially Dave Phipp. But at this point, I think they find a way to get both guys in, because Brandon Joseph is playing some really good football. He's got more defensive upside than CJ. And I think you can let CJ be your, special teams ace, and let Brandon Joseph kind of be your emergency 4th safety if it comes to that. So at this point, I think they're both in.
Let's get into the kicker situation, a little bit more on receivers and that blow in Minnesota today, which was kind of tough for the Vikings, certainly with J.J. McCarthy. We'll get into that next with Colton from The Athletic. Locked On Lions today is sponsored by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with a lot of stuff, kids' activities, big work projects, and more, it's easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it, right? But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. You want to go see a therapist, you're thinking about talking to somebody, I'm telling you, the best thing to do is give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist. What's great about BetterHelp is you can switch therapists anytime you want for no additional charge. Never skip therapy day with our friends at BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Colton Pouncy with us from theathletic.com. By the way, Dave Burkett is back. I saw today.
He is.
Good to see
Nice to have
Dave.
him. Absolutely.
Was he wearing those famous skinny shorts he always wears? Or
I wasn't paying attention, but I will next time we're out there for sure. I'll let you know.
Shout out to Dave. He did a great job covering the Olympics and now is back. By the way, one of our everydayers, Dan Wright, we got to give a shout out to Dan as well. Appreciate him listening each and every day right here on Locked On Lions as well. All right. The kicking situation is interesting. It was like, they brought in some guys weeks ago to kind of push Jake Bates and at least try out. They didn't pick any of them. Dave Phipps said the other day, no, he's getting reps. We need him. Bangs through that 53-yarder the other night. How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, at this point, I think he's their guy, and I asked Phip a couple days ago, just like, what was that about that, you tried out some kickers, but you didn't bring any in. You're giving him a lot of reps. I think you could argue maybe it's, not hurting, but it's got to be tiring to make like attempt 7-8 kicks in a row, like he's been doing in some of these practices. Normally they would trade off, every other kick or something like that, or every other series. But right now it's just Bates getting every single rep. And part of me wonder if they were just trying to put some pressure on him and make things as difficult as possible so he comes out better from it. And that's kind of the sense I got after talking to Phip the other day. And one thing I mentioned is he's a super talented kicker. And he's just also young. He just needs reps. It's like any position. And the fact that he's our only guy right now, it's kind of unique. With a cornerback position, you got some young guys here, but they're rotating so much because they all need reps. But having only Bates as your kicker right now is giving him the opportunity to succeed or fail every single day. And I think that's kind of what they want to see from him. So they love the kid. They're trying to see if they can make it work. He has been better after a rough patch. He hit the 53-yarder in the preseason, nailed a 64-yarder a couple of days ago at the end of practice. He did miss an extra point today, but otherwise I think was pretty solid. So I think yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think it's interesting. I do think they're going to bring somebody else in maybe when final cuts go down and could stash him on the practice squad. But I kind of like that they're letting it ride with him right now.
I think that would be the question. Like, if they're going to bring in someone else, it would be, after cut day. And I don't even know if Bates would make it to the practice squad because he did have interest from other teams when the Lions signed them. So I think you would run the risk of that. So if he's good enough, he'll be the guy. If not, they'll bring someone else in after cut day.
I'm with you on that because look at Green Bay. Their kicking situation continues to be a mess, and they wanted Bates too. Lions outbid them. So that would be interesting. I mentioned before about wide receiver 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever we're calling it, but Caden Davis had an interesting day today. Sounded like looked good. All these guys keep moving up and down the ladder. I mean, Isaiah Williams was good the other night. How do you see this playing out? And is there a leader in the clubhouse?
Yeah, they do kind of trade spots. I think the one thing the coaching staff is looking for is consistency, and the fact that you're hearing about someone new every day, I don't think is good, even though it sounds good. I think they'd rather just one guy step up. So the guy today was Caden Davis. He had a nice long gain on a catch. I think he actually had a good joint practice, last week in New York as well. So he's trending in the right direction. But, I don't know. That's a spot that seems pretty wide open. And to be honest with you, I would monitor the trade market. Cut days from other teams. If you can find a wide receiver that you like that can pick up the offense pretty quickly and maybe has some familiarity with Ben Johnson's system, maybe go for that. But I do think the coaches are looking for more and they haven't found it yet.
I get a lot of, come on, Matt. What about Michael Thomas? Michael Thomas wouldn't fit in this locker room. Like,
no.
Come on. Like, don't
so.
you see who Brad Holmes brings in? It's a certain type of player.
And also, Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell were in New Orleans with him for a little bit there. So I feel like, that would have happened already if
Yeah.
they want it to happen. I don't know if they're really pushing for him, I would say. But yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to happen.
Final thing, Saturday in Kansas City. What do you expect? What are you looking for? And we've gone 25 minutes without mentioning the name Nate Sudfeld.
Mhm.
You know, my listeners, it's Dudfeld, Suckfeld. I mean, he's gotten a lot of shrapnel lately. Do you think he plays better Saturday?
Yeah, after I rewatched the game, a lot of it was on the offensive line to me. Like he didn't have a ton of time to sit back there and throw, and I think that kind of hurt the receiver evaluation as well. Now, I'm not saying it was all on the offensive line. There were definitely some throws that he missed, and even Dan Campbell mentioned that. You got to see more from him. But I imagine he's going to play a lot as he did in that game. So I think the hope is he can be better. But I'll really be watching Hendon Hooker. I think it's time to get him, a lot of snaps. And I know he's scheduled to get most of the second half, if not all. But why not start him? Let him let it rip with those guys in KC and see what he can do. I think he's kind of earned that after, solid performance, albeit small one, against the Giants.
Colt, great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time today. As always, love talking to you. Keep up the great work, and we will read your stuff as we do every day.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Colton Pouncy with us from theathletic.com on a Wednesday edition of Locked On Lions.